the live stream going.
I thought you'd be branded Vicon, Tim. I thought you'd have your virtual Vicon background.
Nah,
He's a rebel.
Just the shed. It's not about Vicon, it's about the industry, really.
It's all about Vicon, surely.
Always.
Yeah, exactly. You tell him.
She's too marketing, though.
Yeah, I'm contractually obligated. All right. Looks like we have got pretty much everyone in. So I will go ahead and get us started, and then people can just join. All right. We've got the YouTube stream going. A few hellos. Hello, hello. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first session in the Vicon Industry Panel Webinar Series. We're kicking off this new series with a live panel discussion and Q&A on all things virtual production, from in-camera VFX to performance capture. We have five Vicon customer panelists here, so thank you to you guys for making the time and joining us for this conversation. I'll quickly introduce them after my little spiel and give them a chance for a brief explanation of their role, and then Tim will take it away with the conversation. So the structure of this is we have 5 key topics, discussions around virtual production. We'll do like 8 to 10 minutes on each one, and then we'll be taking your questions at the end. So the Q&A section is open. You can start submitting those, and I will be monitoring throughout the discussion, and then we'll pick some to answer at the end. Make sure you're following our social channels because there's other webinars coming up. We're scheduling a bunch for the spring and the summer. We already have 2 more VFX focused panels that will be very similar to this one. We have one on game development in March and one on mocap education in April. So you can register for those now at vicon.com/events. So to kick us off with some introductions, we have Dan Pack, the managing director of Silver Spoon. So I'll give you a second to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, you did it really well. I'm Dan Pack, managing director at Silver Spoon. We're a performance capture and virtual production studio based in Brooklyn.
Amazing. Next, we have Isaac Partouche, head of virtual production at Double Negative.
Hi, everyone. So so I'm the head of virtual production at DNEG, and I'm at DNEG to develop the virtual production in general, starting for the previous department to the final pixel render to the camera.
Amazing, welcome. Next, we have Brian Mitchell, head of Rebellion Film Studios.
Hi guys, as you say, I'm at Rebellion. Along with Rebellion, I've also run Audio Motion for a number of years. It's all part of the same group now, and we're sort of moving, I guess, historically from just mocap into performance capture and virtual production.
Nice, welcome. And last, we have Ben Kidd, technical artist at Epic Games.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I work at Epic, and I'm actually here in the London lab, London office, where behind us we've got our in-camera visual effects stage. And my role should be broadly technical artist and perhaps even less broadly virtual production, but I think as many of you know, once you get into in-camera visual effects, that's mostly what you do. So I'm very focused in that area now, and I've been part of the team here building the stage and supporting customers from here as well.
Awesome. Then I think everybody knows Tim, but Tim Doubleday, our VFX product manager, will be hosting and kind of moving things along from here. Do you want to start with the poll?
No, we can get to that. I think we can
Okay,
put that
perfect.
in maybe in the middle.
Awesome.
I think that was a nice segue, Ben, to kind of open up about virtual production and how many topics it covers. It's obviously the buzzword in the industry has been really for a while since you guys did the SIGGRAPH presentation. with Lux and the crew there. And I think in terms of breaking it down, I spoke to former colleague from me and Brian worked with, Matt Rank, who's now at Netflix, saying, all these different elements that go into virtual production. So you've got kind of VR scouting, you've got previs, you've got performance capture, and then in-camera VFX and simulcam. It's kind of, I think, slightly tied together there. But I'm just wondering how you guys are really utilizing those various aspects of virtual production within your workflows at the minute. I don't know who wants to start. Dan, do you want to just give a bit of an overview on kind of how you see those coming together?
Yeah, it's and I think I forget which one of you said it, but it's funny. Virtual production has become kind of a blanket term, and for us, I think working in PCap for so long, when it first, we've been professing all of this and doing virtual production, so to speak, since we started. I mean, it's in the nature of what we do. In a way, I think it's humbling to see it so widely accepted now. I think a lot of these practices that we've probably all been promoting for years now are starting to get justice and starting to to people to actually understand its application and use. And it took this pandemic to really push the hand for a lot of directors and a lot of production to actually understand its application and to realize the many ways that it can be used beyond just doing PCap. For us as a studio, we use it for in-camera visual effects through our LED stage, but increasingly a lot for broadcast AR, as we've done over the Super Bowl or the World Series or a bunch of crowd work that we did last year. And so I think, its application to industries from film and TV to broadcast, music, commercial production is it's enormous.
Yes, I think it's a really good point. And the XR stuff is obviously really exciting. I think it's where part of the industry is going, and I think we'll get onto that further in the webinar. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has a comment, kind of, I guess, Ben, maybe in terms of how Unreal's looking at all these different areas and kind of building a feature set around that.
Yeah, I think when you look at all the areas of the engine that touch virtual production, it's very, me being focused on in-camera visual effects, for example, is very easy to just get stuck in there, and then I'll suddenly be supporting a customer that involves something to do with live events, and then you go and take a look at what that customer's doing, and you suddenly realize how much of a context switch there is in order to do something in XR versus a film set. So live XR, let's say broadcast, versus a film set, can be completely different set of workflows using more or less the same kinds of technology, right? And that's fascinating, I think. And I think it's also really interesting to see where, and we see this being in a centralized position where perhaps the other panelists are in specific areas. At Epic, we support customers through into the arts and other areas of media entertainment as well. And so we see people using end display, for example, for things that have no bearing on film, or broadcast. And it's very, very fascinating to see that. So it's probably even broader than we know, because people can pick this up and run with it and do wild and wonderful things. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at the Facebook pages that are popping up showing, all the indie teams kind of building these like around Vive tracking and Oculus tracking and kind of these more affordable, kind of lower end. I shouldn't say more affordable because Vicon is affordable, of course, but the kind of more indie development side of the business, and it really is those people that are kind of coming up with these new and interesting ideas, I think, alongside the kind of bigger productions. I mean, Isaac, I know you're on set and you can't really talk about what you're doing.
No, I can't.
In relation to that show,
yes. Yeah, what I'm doing right now. Yeah. So in general, at DNEG, we cover starting for the previous department. We're doing everything as we can in real time and use Unreal as a main render for that. So we start to build on device to do the virtual camera to be more efficient, to be more productive, and to answer one specific demand on the market. And then we also bring this quality of asset during the shoot, so we can visualize in real time the set extension and this type of services. And based on that, you can extract poster Vs, because you can record and you can start the editing on a movie. And you can also extract the camera tracking for the post-production. So we try to use old concept of VP for every part of the workflow, and try to make everything more intuitive, and get the right decision on set, basically, to don't waste the time to back and forth with the director and the DOP. So this is how we develop on the film industry the VP. And recently we start to use a lot LEDs setup, because we can get something really close for the final to the camera with this type of technique. So it's this is a type of the range of where we use VP right now in film industry.
Yeah, I just always think it's funny, Brian. It kind of, when I was at Audio Motion, we were putting marks on people's faces and building these huge camera rigs to do full performance capture. And now all it takes is an iPhone and an AR kit, and you're getting something that looks really good. You know, using the new MetaHuman asset, for example.
It's kind of crazy where it's come from. I mean, obviously, like, well, as you know, I mean, like our sort of primary service provision was really to the games industry, and seeing the film guys coming in more and more. And you slowly, over the time, you know, you've seen the sort of these two areas, sort of massive areas coming together, and they're just sharing all the tech now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think real time is definitely the key, and kind of a bit like what Isaac said about making things seamless and making sure that the creative process works alongside the technical process. I think that's key. Yeah. You know, something as product manager, it's something I'm always trying to do is make sure the software is easy to use and can almost be run hidden behind the scenes, and let really what the creative team sees is just the visuals, and everything else is kind of seamless behind the scenes.
Well, one of the big things, sorry, Tim, just briefly, one of the big things I think is how it's forced collaboration between the different departments. I think, you know, because it affects, you know, everybody's involved, and everybody needs to, you know, everybody doesn't need to know it inside out, but they kind of are all touched by it, if you like, which makes for a really good collaboration, I think, which solves a lot of problems before you get to them. So yeah it's excellent.
Yeah, I don't know. There's this kind of idea that you're saving money, but I kind of see it more as you're front loading everything. So everything kind of moves into pre-production. You know, you still have to build these incredibly highly detailed assets in the engine to project onto the LED walls, and obviously foreground characters if it's a digital human. So there's still a cost associated to that. But then by moving it into pre-production and into a live set, you are ultimately hoping to save money because you're signing things off quicker. I mean, do you find that to be the case in production, Isaac?
I think, yeah, the idea is to try to make most as possible every technique easy and to approach. I think one of the goal of VP from my perspective is to definitely increase the creativity of the director and DOP on set, and try to make everything much easier to bring more directors on this type of movie. Because right now, if you look, the top 10 on the most, in the industries can generate a lot of money. You have Spielberg, you have James Cameron, you have all this, you have Peter Jackson. All those directors are great because they use a lot technology behind every movie. And I'm sure there are more directors can be interested to use visual effects, but they're not really, what I can say, they're not really, they don't like so much because it's quite complex. But I think with the VP, we can help to make that stuff a little bit much easier for everybody, and helps to the industry to spread the larger scope of the director who want to use technology and be more creative. This is what I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think, kind of one of the most remarkable things being on set is really forcing that conversation between live action and visual effects, which, on film and TV is something that generally happens kind of slowly but steadily. On commercial production, like very rare that there is as tight of a conversation between visual effects and live action. And that conversation being forced and being right on set and being able to have those, able to address things that normally, somebody in the live action saying, somebody else will deal with this. I don't have to worry about it. That's what's really key. And then I think further to that is also encouraging previs. I think we, and I'm sure you guys too as a studio, heavily previs things, in a way that still allows the director and creative to experiment. But the great thing about Unreal is that we can do all that previs and within that same ecosystem, bring it to set. And I think the more that we can encourage people to do that, use tools like Simulcam and Vicam, I think it'll only help.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of where you go from previs into Simulcam into in-camera VFX, and kind of how, at what point do you say, yes, we can do this? At what point do you say, actually, it's not worth it, we need to dial it back and maybe do something else?
Yeah, I think it's true. When you start with a really detailed previs, it helps to be more efficient and set. And as Dan explained, virtual production technique helps to communication on set. It's more intuitive. It's much easier. There are something also can be very difficult to control, is the fact that because it's in real time and you can see it. Sometimes you are locked on the previs point of view, but obviously the director wants to do something else, and the DOP say, "Oh, I don't like this light, I want to change it." So it gives a little bit more flexibility, but that can be quite dangerous, because the time is, as everybody knows on set, is money, and what happened is, I think VP on set costs quite a lot if you talk about LED setup, and the idea is try to get the final of the camera. So every time we open the door of the creativity, it automatically increases the hours of manipulation on the scene, and it's hard to manage that in reality. So it's a new methodology, everybody starting to get it, but that's, as Dan say, I can definitely feel the fact that there are a lot of communications, there are much more people need to interact and taking decision directly there, on set. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think the fidelity points is a really interesting one, and kind of how you build these scenes and get them looking almost photoreal so they can be projected. I know, Ben, the kind of where Unreal comes in and with the marketplace and kind of being able to quickly get these unbelievable looking environments up. It's a kind of key thing.
Yeah, I think it's easy and quick to put something together that looks and feels great, and that's a really awesome place to start, especially if you're pre-vising or tech vising or something. It's important to have a very short creative cycle so that you can throw things together quickly and not have to stop and wait and think and distract yourself and lose your creative flow. But with in-camera visual effects in mind, the optimization of the assets is incredibly important for it to run performant on an LED wall at the frame rates. Yeah, I mean, as I think more demand for high quality photorealistic game assets effectively, right, will grow. The marketplaces will grow with that, and there'll be more available that we can just start using off the shelf, and that's fantastically exciting. And obviously we're changing the way that we render things, and things are going to get faster as well. But we're always going to be squeezing the last millisecond out of a GPU. Okay, just accept that, right? And therefore there is a discipline, an incredibly important discipline that I think is one that takes time and expertise. Hence, you may using the word discipline, and that is to achieve a performant but photorealistic looking asset. And it's exciting seeing people make that shift from traditional CG animation over into using a game engine's render pipeline. I remember having to do that myself 5 or 6 years ago, and it is a bit odd, but at first. But as you start building it, you start building assets that are much more universal to use. So where you might just model something for a shot and then it kind of never sees the light of day, now you would model something for a shot that works throughout the entire production and potentially is now part of this digital backlot that then makes its way into the next production that's completely unrelated potentially. So now we start looking at putting our artist's time into something that's actually got a longer return, a longer value. So it's changing things from not only from a technical point of view, but also how we think about these digital assets. But like I say, it's really important that we don't just rely on drag and drop, if you like.
Some mega scans here and some digital humans over here.
You'll get fairly far, but you might run out of road pretty quickly if you get overzealous. And yeah, something to keep an eye on for sure.
I think, Brian, it kind of puts Rebellion in a bit of a unique position because as a games company, you're building these assets for an engine already. You've kind of, you know, you've already got this high standard within the space, and then you presumably are you thinking about utilizing those across various shows and how? Yeah,
absolutely. We got several sort of projects in the pipeline, if you like, utilizing the IP we own. In sort of a few different ways, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic position to be in. I suppose I'm sort of kind of, I also sort of have the two hats, I suppose, which is the sort of service provision to sort of through the audio motion and mocap and all that kind of thing, which now incorporates our sort of VFX part of the company. So we've got a sort of lot more to offer in terms of like previs and things like that. But then, yeah, there's the whole sort of like your own toy box, if you like, of IP that is sort of just a mountain of it that we can sort of select very cool characters, get some concept art done, and you know, and then it's endless the amount of sort of possibilities we've got in a way. So it's sort of like it's almost kind of sort of contain that and get a clear sort of path of where you want to go with it, because there's so many opportunities right now. It's a bit daunting, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, that's so funny you said, Brian. You know, I think about that constantly. You know, I think for years, you know, as doing mocap, you know, we were fine with just running, you know, all of our real time back in Mobo, and it worked well, and it accomplished what we needed. And then, you know, Unreal came out, and we're like, oh, well, this looks pretty. This is shiny. Let's start doing things this way. And then now in the last year, it's like, boom, volumetric clouds, metahumans, melt your brain. And then there's so much cool tech, so many cool things happening. What should we focus on?
Yeah, totally.
Did you find that, Brian, in the game space, people are coming and bringing their own environments and characters and
yeah, for sure. I mean, like as you just said, I mean, like it was all motion builder before, wasn't it? And sort of bringing in, you know, grayscale sort of environment, and we'd do the proxy layout on the stage, and people would dodge around boxes and whatnot and all that kind of thing. And it was cool, and you could record the real time, and it looked good. You know, it was plenty good enough for sort of like blocking the cameras and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, now it's just sort of, I don't know, it's just gone crazy in a way, all to the good. You know, I mean, it's just the possibilities. It's almost too much, and I think we've actually seen that before, actually, with sort of directors on set. Is because it's kind of not their world and you live it from day to day, you kind of sort of, you know, you get it and you just take it for granted, I think, sometimes. And like we've been in a situation before where a production have brought the director in to just almost sort of like play with the tech a little bit and just get a feel for it and understand how far they can push it and what it offers them. Because I think there's so many, again, it's so many sort of, you know, it is a tool. It's an aid to sort of get a production done. So you don't want the whole sort of tech to take over the production, but the director and DP and so on need to really appreciate, I think, how far they can take things, how, you know, where they can fly the camera, you know, that sort of like, you know, impossible shot that you couldn't, you know, you would love to get. Well, it's kind of maybe there now. So, you know, but those guys need to sort of get hands-on, I think, with it to really sort of appreciate how far they can push it, you know. So yeah, that's my
I guess in a production now, by doing that creative stuff beforehand, like in pre-production or previs, how do you cope with that? How do you cope with that, building that time in, you know, and the resource and the asset management, and, you know, like this idea of having a virtual backlog? That's great if you have those assets good to go. but kind of building these scenes takes time, right?
Yeah, I'll take that. I don't. Sorry, you have to say. I just keep talking. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like that's going to be the enemy. I think is productions having the time, because there's almost again, like I say, it's too many options almost for some of these guys, and they could lose themselves for days and weeks or whatever, just sort of like trying things out and seeing what it works. Because by default, creatives sort of want to try new things and try something different and that kind of thing. So you have to be quite strict there, I think. And also the other side of it is from a production point of view, like the cost of locking it all down and creating those environments and not being able to go back and change it. Well, you can change it obviously, but it kind of makes it potentially a little bit more difficult to fix things in post, as it were, which I think is possibly one of the threats to the process a little bit. Is people have to be happy and content with the sort of like the previs and locking it down and happy with that's the blueprint of where you're going to go with the production. If people want to change it later, that could be expensive. Well, it is by default anyway, but
Yeah, you find that as well, Isaac or Dan?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I think part of anything like this, where there's this big shiny new toy, is just educating clients and educating people about whether its application is actually needed. Like, just because you could do it, should you? So if you're shooting a living room scene that doesn't really, like, maybe it's just better to build the set. Or, if you're shooting if you want to shoot Notre Dame, do you actually need to build the entire thing, or do you just need like one part of the exterior? And I think I think these are all conversations that, again, you just need to have. You need to previs or tech viz and see really just what is actually useful. Again, in commercial production, at least, commercial production, at least in New York, is a big part of what we do. The prep time and lead time is nowhere near what you get on a film. We often have 2-3 weeks before we need to shoot, and we could try to reshuffle how that production schedule works, but it's been done this way for years. So we have to rethink about how you build assets that are appropriate for what you're shooting, or just educating the client on another way to shoot. And if it's not going to be LED, if it's just going to be green screen, it's still encouraging that you're using some type of camera tracking to make the post process more efficient. I think that's equally important as figuring out ways to optimize the process.
Yeah, this is probably one of the big challenge on the DP, is how we can back and forth between the normal standard VFX pipeline and the real-time VFX pipeline. This communication is not quite easy for now, and this is where definitely something needs to be improved. I know there's USD formats and a lot of stuff going on, but nothing is quite easy yet. And this is something that DNEG works a lot and this is something that on the pipeline we want to have something up and running really soon. So I know it's one of the big part of that is when we're on set doing everything in real time, all the changement, we want to keep that and easy to bring it back on normal VFX pipeline. And for now, it's not easy, but we expect something soon, and we work on this.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Being able to iterate and then being able to go backwards and say, actually, I want that previous version. And
we didn't have this problem with the FBX and the motion builder, because it's quite easy compatible with Maya. So, and the structure of the arc and everything are purely the same. So it was communication was much easier. But with Unreal and it's a little bit slightly different.
Yeah, I think USD is a really interesting one. Vicon, we added USD support to Shogun Post for the animation, to the animated skeleton. But obviously, there's so many other layers that you could build on top of that within the workflow. And obviously, I know Unreal supports USD and is, I think, one of the better kind of implementations of it. But I think, I'm in total agreement. It needs something there, and also for multiple people to be able to come in and make changes and still maintain a core file within that is a real challenge. I mean, it's super hard. Like, FBX was never going to do that for sure. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know, Ben, did you have any thoughts on? I guess it's not really your area of, the engine, but
I think it's important to have bidirectional, non-destructive, non-linear time control. Go back in time, basically. I think it's incredibly important to think in terms of creative cycles. My time working purely in interactive, as in building AR, VR games and apps, taught me a lot about the need for iterative work. And what's really nice is I've moved, back into CGI animation as it stands now from the perspective of Unreal Engine. And it's pushing people in potentially much more linear workflows into much more agile, iterative cycles of production. And so you can change something later down the line that perhaps isn't always that expensive to change, because part of your prep was to make sure that you could actually indeed change that thing further down the line. And that's really exciting and, again, important to have. And I think that when we build pipelines, when we build tools, we should be making sure that they're not cul-de-saced by their very nature of why they're engineered. I think it's important that things are flexible in that way, because when you're flexible to make changes, you're creatively relaxed and the best work comes out of it, ultimately.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, I think to that end, again, I think as a mocap studio servicing, all other visual effects studios, we're generally used to having to work with, having to figure out how we integrate into everybody's pipeline. And usually with mocap, that was always fairly easy. Like you said, if they're not working in Maya, we can deliver FBX and we can generally figure something out. But, broadcast is traditionally a lot of cinema 4D. There's a whole host of people, and I'm sure a lot of attendees who are very Blender. And, it's just a mix of all things. And I agree. I think non-destructive, easy ways that we could figure out how to work across all of these different pipelines is going to be key.
Yeah, and I think for Vicon, it's as much about sync, making sure that all the different elements are in sync. I know we were lucky enough to visit the Epic lab, and that was really the key component there, was making sure you had a master clock giving you sync to your ARRI and then to the LED wall and to the Vicon system.
When I shut my eyes, I see the word sync.
Yeah.
Same here. Yeah, no, it's the sync. It's this is really interesting point, because on the film industry, we never use genlock in the past. It's purely time code. Nobody know about genlock at all. And now without genlock, it's quite almost impossible to get the final result. So it's example on this production right now, when I'm working, we need to genlock the camera, we need to genlock everything to make sure when we do the simulcam, the mixed reality, everything is perfectly smooth and obviously aligned perfectly with no lag or no delay, and this bad result that we want to avoid. So this is also a really interesting big change on the industry, is that, and how we make everybody understanding it's a little bit different as a time code. We need both. And it's also challenging. It's also challenging. Yeah.
I would say time code is what keeps me up at night.
I think it's and then the production says, "Oh, actually, can I make my camera wireless, please? And I want to have it as a steady cam and still have general sync."
One more cable cannot be wireless, or maybe wireless, but with potential problem. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think one of the interesting things for me that's come out of virtual production and working in it is just the importance now of when you're in post, your signal chain is just, it's important, it's there, but it's kind of for granted. And now suddenly in virtual production, your signal chain is this invisible thing that needs managing. And I find, myself and other people around us, everyone's upskilling very fast in all these signals. and how they work, and but the anatomy of a Genlock signal. You know, I didn't think I'd ever need to know that. So it's fascinating, and the better we understand it, the easier things will be. And I'm also just interested and excited about some of this driving those signals, some of this driving some of these technological decisions in the future, because a lot of these signals are very old signals from purposes that maybe just aren't as relevant anymore. So that'll be an interesting development over time, I think.
Yeah, there's some new standards coming, right? I don't know too much about them, but like NTP and these kind of more industry ways of going away from Genlock and maybe focusing on like a higher frequency solution. Have any of you kind of looked at adopting those techniques? Or
not for me yet.
Okay.
Just Genlock. Just Genlock.
Okay, so yeah, let's get Genlock done and then we can move on.
You know, yeah, we still have a lot of problem with just that too. So it's funny how on virtual production, let's say technique, we need to know obviously software, but it's really important to know all the aspects of the hardware side also. We talk about computer, we talk about master clock, we talk about, you know, every component that you put on your workflow need to be well controlled on the hardware side also. And every detail, if this detail is not there, it doesn't work. Something, a cable doesn't work. So it's really frustrating because we achieve a massive workflow with maybe 10 computers connected together to display on the massive wall. You have 5-6 computers on multi-session in Unreal to do different tasks together. So everything works really well, but we just lose the master clock for a few seconds, and obviously it's mess up everything. So this is the most frustrating part of this department, is how we can make that robust and make it robust with less constraint like that, this stupid stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, 8 months ago, we set up an LED stage, and at the time there were, it was like 424 or 425. There really was zero documentation, and you were just kind of like,
no,
why doesn't this work? And you're right. I mean, you know, a lot of times, again, now 426 and Unreal has just has changed things. It's made a lot of things a lot easier. I think, you know, there's still a lot of times we're just scratching your head, or, you know, we're saying like, why doesn't this work? And then ultimately we find it's just like a bad cable. But it's a lot, you know, it's a lot of this, like, just kind of figuring things out. But I think the great thing is, you know, it's obvious by like Brian's background and your background, Isaac and Ben, is that it's being adopted so much, and now we're starting to create that knowledge base. Or you go on a Facebook group like the Unreal Engine group, which has grown so much, and people are actually contributing to that knowledge base. And I think that's what's going to be key. You know, in mocap, we've been doing it for, like you guys probably been doing it for several years. And so you have a general idea of how things work, and if something breaks, how to fix it. With this, it's such nascent technology still. And there are so many components, and it's so much more technology than what live action is used to having on set, that, you know, I think we'll get there. In a year, it'll be better, but it's still, you know, mocap itself is even still evolving. But it's definitely a challenge.
Are there any other kind of challenges within the space aside from sync?
Well, I was just going to make a point about when we built the London lab, the amount of different people that were involved, to the amount of different disciplines and skill sets that were involved to complete the stage. And to answer your question about challenges, I think my thought on that is that all the expertise is out there. Imagine it's all floating. How do you grab all the right people and put them into a chain of communication? And is there enough crossover between the experience of the person here and the person here and the person here, so that they can actually, you know, understand what each other are trying to achieve with their own individual sets of experiences and knowledge? And that's been really exciting, because almost everything that almost universally when people walk away from like an in-camera visual effects demo test here or a shoot that we've been on, is if there's someone who's new that's coming to the group, it could even be a focus product. Okay, it could be that something that you think at the top of your head that would only really interact with the camera and doesn't necessarily have to worry about so many other systems. Turns out, yeah, they do too. And the classic thing when people walk out the room is like, thanks for that, that was awesome. I learned a lot today. And what's happening is that in order to achieve this, there's a heck of a lot of different industrial disciplines. So there's stuff coming from cinematography, stuff coming from visual effects, stuff coming from mocap and tracking, there's stuff coming from, you know, live events and LED processing and stuff like that. And then you're putting all of that into one room and these people are collaborating. And over time, we're going to homogenize our skills more, not completely, but that's been a big challenge, is what don't you know about what you are trying to do on the stage and what other people can bring to you solving those problems. And I see it as much as an opportunity as a problem, and it's very fun. And it's and to your points about the virtual production Facebook group, it's a really obvious and clear example of how much of a community virtual production has. It feels like a community. You know, maybe it's easy for me to say because I'm kind of like in a fairly centralized position talking to lots of you, but it's certainly a big knowledge sharing space, and that's really exciting. And I think I'd encourage that we keep that up, because that brings the barrier of that challenge down if we can all be recommending each other to each other and sharing knowledge and skills really.
Totally, yeah, totally agree with that. One thing actually that Dan mentioned earlier is, you know, the pandemic. It's sort of kind of caused that whole, you know, everybody that probably wouldn't talk to each other, you know, people that like to sort of go off and do their own thing and research stuff and develop their own ways of working. The sort of pandemic's almost sort of it's sort of given people perhaps a little bit more time to reflect and sort of suss out where they are in the world of this stuff, but also bringing people together. And it's the sort of perfect storm in a way of having this sort of weird restriction around the world as it is, but also all this tech available that all these different departments need to learn a little bit of to work together. And that's the best thing about it. The best thing to come out of it anyway is that whole collaboration piece, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? That people can come together during a pandemic, share ideas, and like Ben says, it's great if you get in a room together.
Yeah.
But that's just not always often and not always possible. It's a really
but how many remote shoots have you all done? I mean, like, you know, we've had clients across the world, like dialing in, remote in, directing stuff. And, you know, you obviously by default, we find solutions. That's what we do, I feel, is like that we're just problem solvers. So like, you know, pandemic, right, okay, how are we going to sort this? You know, how are we going to make this happen and work and still produce stuff? So, you know, it's again, our tech that we have at our disposal enables us to sort of solve a lot of those problems. So yeah, you know, the best of a bad situation, eh?
Yeah. I'm in the interest of, I wanted to save a bit of time at the end so we can get some questions from the audience, so to speak. For just kind of the last question, I could kind of tie the two questions together. Where do you see this all going? Obviously, we all appreciate it's relatively early in the life cycle for a lot of these solutions, and kind of everyone's learning as we go along. But is there any areas that you think we'll see some improvements in, or maybe areas that we are lacking in technology or in expertise? I don't know who wants to start. Do you want to go, Dan?
Of course.
Put you on the spot.
You know, again, I think it's hard to say. Like I said, the tech is advancing at such a pace, and there's so many incredible vendors. You know, we often say, especially on the AR side, where AR or XR and LED, 90% of the challenge, let's not say the problem, and maybe perhaps some of the opportunity is on the camera tracking. You know, it's either your best friend or it's your enemy. And I think that is really where we could see a lot of improvement. There's great tech, right? Moses, NCAM, obviously, what we always go back
Vicon.
to, Vicon, Opti. There's so many great solutions. It's not as practical for us to put 200 Vicon Vantage cameras in a stadium the day before a game. But there's just so many different parts of the puzzle that we need to solve. But it's definitely a tech that can be used now, and it's obviously being used. Somebody along the way years ago said, "Hey, let's use green screen and start doing our locations in post," and that I'm sure it took a while. And I think this is just the same thing. It's an innovation on an older technology.
I think the same. So everything need to get what the industry expect now. Is they expect like a final to the camera. So we need to be perfect on every aspect on the workflow. Tracking need to be perfect. We talk about sub-pixel quality. There are no system can do that for now. Maybe mechanical, so magical robotic arm, but it's difficult to use in reality on set. So let's say we need to go to sub-pixel quality on the tracking. The same for if we use the LEDs, we need to get the final. So we need a perfect color grading solutions to make sure that the sensor and the LEDs are on the same LUT and everything need to be perfectly aligned. We talk about the synchronization. The master clock has to be really essential for everything that you create on your workflow. So VFX, we don't have for now convincing VFX in real time and human in real time. So all the characters, all the VFX, it's difficult to say I can do that in real time and I can convince any producer of VFX people because we are far away for that. Even for the background, it's not good if you start with the photogrammetric scene. You start with that base. You can use that for the background, and I think it's convincing if you are a little bit depth of focus on your camera. You can say, okay, we get the final, but we still, even Unreal and all the game engine are really impressive for now. If you compare for the normal VFX pipeline, and if you talk with the people being the VFX today, we have a massive gap, and this is. At DNEG, we have probably one of the best artists in the world. So they did so many environments, and they know how to build it and how to look photoreal and perfectly on the camera. If we compare from now what we have in real time with the game engine, it's good. It's look amazing good, but it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. So there are a lot of stuff we need to improve. But I think we are all going in the same direction, and we are all doing the same thing to make it look more and more convincing and perfect, but we still have lots of stuff to do on the total pipeline.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And obviously, you look at the Unreal 5 video, Ben, and it just kind of blew my mind at how amazing that looks. I'm sure we're all super excited to get our hands on that.
This is why I poked a little bit Unreal. I want the Unreal 5 now to test.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to my inbox that day. MetaHumans was announced, and our inbox is very busy about people wanting to get their hands on it. So I'm used to that. I think one of the areas, if I was going to look at this slightly more holistically, there's an opportunity not to be missed that we always do, and that's in when I say we, I mean like society. Engineering since the dawn of time has always missed the opportunity of standardization, and HD came along, and then there was like 10 flavors of HD. And I guess what we should try to do while we're in this sort of like, I'm not going to say we're in a nascent stage because virtual production's been around in many guises for a long time. But let's just say within this generation of virtual production, because it's so community driven, and for the first time we can all talk to each other within an instant. I think it's worth considering that we design things together, and we design them in a way where they're interchangeable quickly, so that perhaps on our side at least, the customer hasn't got to be too worried about going from one tracking system to another. Because at the end of the day, what's good for virtual production is whatever the right tool is to deliver the job. And that's dependent on potentially down to what that shot on that day needed a different tracking system because there was something that another tracking system couldn't achieve. And if if we can do our jobs properly, then that on the implementation side, we're working with the tracking vendors to make sure that it's just, okay, we'll just point it at Vicon instead, rather than a completely different tracking paradigm coming into it. And obviously, Tim, we talk about this a lot as we've been putting the Vicon system here, and we work with the tracking vendors across the board to try and make it so that it fits like a jigsaw. It's a bit more plug and play, and there's only so much that we can control, and we're only one cog in a large engine. But yeah, it's just like a war cry really to say, hey, let's communicate and standardize and share protocols, and where possible. It's not always going to be possible, but if we do that, then we all benefit from things needing less setup time, needing less prep, leading to getting to the creative bit quicker.
Yeah.
And I think that's an area where I think things could be improved for sure. And I'd actually say that humans have been in the past particularly bad at this. Around the world, you've still got all different types of measurement for how long something is. So I'm fighting a losing battle here somewhat, but you get my point.
If we can all use the same live link infrastructure then and time steps, then that's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, and also I also don't believe in standardization being that it's owned, right? So standardization should not have a TM after it, right? If it's done well, because it should just be a thing that we all agree on is a protocol that works really, really well. Actually, the internet's been pretty good at that. If you think about UDP, is what's underneath, is one of the protocols in LiveLink, and that's UDP is one of the first things you learn when you start building internet enabled devices, and suddenly you realize UDP is going on everywhere. So we can do it right, and I just think it'd be good if we're aware of it, and so that when we see more opportunities, we don't accidentally skip them. And quite often those things are just a Zoom call away nowadays to say, hey, if we do it like this, would it work for all you guys or just one of you? And then you can say, oh, actually, do it like this, and it's a bit more universal. So that'd be nice. Maybe I'm dreaming, but like I say, that's one of the areas I think that we would all enjoy if things were plug and play.
Definitely. Cool. Do you have anything to add, Brian, or should we go to some questions?
Let's go for some questions. Fire
away. Well, first of all, I think we can start a poll. If Alicia's still there. Here we go.
Yes, just set that up. So what tracking system are you using or looking to use on your next virtual production? So that should be showing for everyone.
It is going to be weighted. It's a Vicon webinar. I appreciate that.
If it's not, Tim, we've got a problem.
Yeah, if it's something, yeah. So I'll go question just some of the best practices, use cases for using LiDAR scanning within a VFX workflow. Has anyone got any experience? Obviously now LiDAR scanners in the new iPhone and iPad. Are you using that within your VFX pipeline, VP pipeline?
Oh, sorry, go for it, Isaac.
Yeah, on my experience, because I do a lot mixed reality on set, I use LiDAR and iPhone to get really quick model of the set. It's helped to align the set extension and the background and the set. So it helps to get an object on your scene to align perfectly. So I use LiDAR in that way with the iPhone or the iPad Pro. And in general, if you get really beautiful photogrammetry scene or LiDAR scene, you can use directly on the background and look photoreal. Yeah. We use a lot.
Yeah, for us on the AR side, for anything broadcast, it's almost essential. And again, we're not using it for final pixel, but we're using it to help plan and place real-time graphics. So a project like we did last summer, where we did real-time crowd sim in stadiums. We LiDAR scanned every major stadium that we did it for. And if we didn't have that scan, a pixel on screen is a matter of somebody appearing like they're floating over right field versus actually placed in their seat. And so when you're doing anything that really requires that type of millimeter accuracy, there's nothing better than LiDAR.
How do you do it to that scale? That's gigantic, right? Must be a real challenge.
Yeah. Again, I think it's creating processes that that allow us to process that data quickly, and then use it effectively in post in real time.
Cool. Did anyone else have anything want to add?
And the guys covered it nicely. And I have used LiDAR creatively, actually, for Final Pixel for the fact that it looks cool. So capturing historical buildings and doing kind of factual entertainment, I think uses that technology really well to communicate things. And that's a really nice analogy of what ultimately LiDAR gets used for in production behind the scenes. It's a fantastic communication tool. It's like a time capsule, right? You're taking a three-dimensional slice of a moment and a space and a place, and that's just an invaluable reference. There's probably too many things to list as to why you'd want to do it. It's just very valuable stuff.
Yeah, we've used it. We've got an external project on right now. We're using it creatively, which is looking quite nice. So yeah, it's got lots of applications.
Yeah, I'm an Android guy. Maybe I need to switch to Apple. That's the way forward. So we've got a question from Julius. He asks, what are the remaining hurdles to prevent real-time engines like Unreal and Unity from being used as a complete replacement for offline ray tracing? Obviously, computation, but has anyone got any thoughts on what else can be brought up? I mean, like Moore's law, obviously everything gets faster and higher fidelity, but no, it's a kind of tricky question. There's no obvious answer, really. Wait for NVIDIA to wait 10 years and see.
Yeah, I think like we did a lot of work over the last year. We acquired a lot of those Quadro 6000s and 2080, and I think you even see such a remarkable jump to the new A6000 or 8000 or the 3090s. It's like it's remarkable what you can do now, and that innovation happened relatively quickly. I think just like you said, Tim, I think let's see what the next updates are from NVIDIA. It'll only get better. It'll only get closer. Again, if you've seen like what we've done with these character mascots that are just covered in fur. If you look at projects that we did like 2 or 3 years ago, you'd say like, oh, that's not so good. And you look at it now and you really can't tell the difference between an offline and then what's going in real time. And even that, I would say in like 6 months, a year from now, you'll still be it'll just continue improving.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that there's this middle ground, which is where you use a game engine and then use it as an offline renderer. So for example, you might be hitting like 60, 70, or maybe 24 FPS for something, for a simulcam, let's just say. But then in order to achieve the final pixel that you really want to use, you might decide that actually you're going to solve some of the aliasing artifacts by rendering it out really, really slowly at 1 frame a second. Like you used to think that was slow. That would have been lightning fast compared to previous CPU rendering. So it's just worth bearing that in mind because it isn't necessarily about being exclusively a real-time renderer or exclusively an offline renderer, because one of the things that I work with V-Ray and Redshift a lot. One of the big improvements that was brought to that was progressive rendering that let you sample a very noisy image potentially, but something that looked and kept your creative cycle moving. So again, I go back to that creative cycle. It's really important that the quicker you can see an image, doesn't have to be the final pixel, but the quicker you can see an image, the better. And anything that pushes us forwards there is a good thing.
Cool. Interesting question. Do you see a potential in indie LED stages? I know at the minute LED panels are incredibly expensive.
I think it's difficult. It's not just the LEDs; it's all the infrastructure with the processing that you need to manage the LEDs, plus to all the computer. It's quite a high-end computer with the with the graphic, the last NVIDIA Quadro card and everything. So it's quite an expensive setup. And even you get something cheaper, and LEDs is still expensive. It's quite hard to make it indie. This is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It is definitely a very, very expensive thing to invest in now. But that said, if we look at mocap for years, Vicon panel. But for years the industry was dominated by Vicon and motion analysis and stuff like that. But over the years now, emerging indie products have come out like Rococo and Perception Neuron and XSense. And even, I think advances within Vicon's product offering that allows it to be accessible from more indie users. And I think the same thing will happen on LED. I mean, really, if you really go deep into LED research, there are hundreds of manufacturers beyond, beyond the main players. And it's only a matter of time until that gets its hands into more indie developers, as it should.
Yeah, it's certainly not cheap to set up a stage, and it's definitely, not cheap to get all the right people on that stage that you need.
Yeah, also.
Because if they're generalists, if you've got a very small generalist crew, there's people willing to pay them a lot of money to go and work somewhere else on something huge. So it's going to be, it's difficult to get an indie thing together. But I would absolutely wouldn't discourage it for a second, because, okay, don't have your ambitions set too high for things that you just cannot afford to achieve. But absolutely do not sit back and wait for it to come to you. If what you're doing is on a Vive or at home, or you're using an OLED to get a shot, right? No shame in that. You're making it work. You're moving forwards. And actually, if all that you're doing is just experimenting on something small that can only really be classified as an R&D moment, and maybe you capture a couple of nice frames on it, but you couldn't ever shoot anyone higher from the waist, I can guarantee you that exercise of doing that is going to prepare you for doing it on a large stage in the future. So anyone who feels like it's not accessible now, but wants to get involved, absolutely get involved with the bit that is accessible to you. And I think that is as small as a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse at home, because you can learn as much as you can learn just in that small space and get a lot out of that. That's going to prepare you for doing something bigger in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's, again, to go back to the Facebook Unreal group, I think that's what you see, and it blows my mind. It's brilliant. I think I wish I was 20 years younger and I had the time to go and do it all myself. Okay. I'm going to finish up because I appreciate you guys for giving up your time. A quick last question. I'm going to tie two together, sorry. And then I'm afraid we have to wrap things up because I think everyone's got to go back to their jobs. Just improvements to the PCap, kind of bringing in the face, the hands and the body, and kind of how you see that improving over time. Obviously, I mentioned AR kit for the facial capture, and Epic releasing the metahumans last week. But personally, I think having assets of that quality is incredible, especially for free. Where do you see that going within your pipelines?
Again, I think AR kit is awesome. We've used it on some smaller things. Wearing an iPhone for a day is not the most comfortable thing. So again, I think there's great products like Faceware, Technoprops out there that make those things a little bit easier. Hands, Shogun has advanced so much. It's great. There's great products like Stretch Sends out there as well. I don't make any money from plugging any of these things. It's just, it's just so much, really just so much tech out there, but also so much good stuff. I think there's a lot of really great tech that just needs R&D and time to look over. So.
I think humans, the new features of Unreal can help a lot on the previs departments because they need to, because for now the previs on humans look very simple in terms of expression. With this type of tool, we can have something a bit more expressive during the previs process. I'm not convincing enough to use that as a final pixel on the camera because the quality is impressive, but it's not good enough again. But for one stage before, for the previs, it's going to help you a lot because when you have a lot of expression, when people are afraid or there's so many expression that is not there on the previs can be there now, and that can be really simple and cheap to do. So I can see on this era a massive use of that.
Totally, I agree with Isaac there. I mean, if you think the previous we used to have where you have an animatic with a character that just sort of literally slid across the screen and things like that, I mean, like that was so common. And with all these things, they just move on and the quality goes up and up. So all those things help. But also the point Dan made about having time to, make sure it's production ready before you put it in front of people. We're always going to have that sort of cycle to run through. But every time there's a new sort of something's improved in some area along the system, it just has to be tested and then just incorporated into the pipeline. So all these things are coming along thick and fast, I think, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that, with something like MetaHuman, again, for anybody on this panel or attendees that have been doing mocap, we know that, we pride ourselves on the quality of the data that we get and that we record. But if it's ultimately going on a improperly made rig, it's like it's all for nothing. And I think the fact that these great free systems are coming out, which allow you to take good data and put it on a great character, is awesome. It'll help improve the quality of the previs. It'll help improve the quality of the final product, and make it all just more accessible.
Yeah,
it's amazing. All right, brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you, and also sharing your views. I think it's been really interesting. I appreciate we didn't get to all the questions, but if anybody wants to email me directly, feel free. Here you go, Alicia's come back to wrap things up.
I'm here. Yeah, so it's on YouTube now, the whole stream. You'll get the link in your email tomorrow, but that is at youtube.com/Vicon if you want to catch up on our first 7 webinars or share this one with anyone. I put up the poll results just in case anyone is interested. 72% Vicon. How did that happen? But interesting to see the others as well. So if you have other questions, you can also tweet us. So our Twitter is Vicon, and I can tag some of our panelists and we can kind of keep the conversation going over there. And definitely register for upcoming webinars because this was a great conversation and I'm really looking forward to continuing that. And if you have any other questions about future webinars, if anybody attending is interested in maybe being on a panel or presenting, you can email me at marketing@vicon.com and we can talk about that. But thank you guys so much. This was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
All right,
all
we'll
the
see you guys
best.
next time.
All right, take care.